The United States will take the necessary steps to make Russia bear the costs of its continued aggression. These are the words of the United States Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, who sent Russia an unequivocal ultimatum during a meeting with representatives of NATO member countries. Washington is taking a tougher stance towards Russia, either end the war or face economic and military pressure. In response, the Kremlin launched another massive attack on Ukraine. Tomorrow, the Ukrainian president will meet the United States president in Washington, where the issue of the White House's consent to the purchase of American long-range missiles will be raised. Not a night goes by without attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure. There is no region of Ukraine that is not threatened by such attacks. Power and gas outages occur in every district. These are purely terrorist attacks, say representatives of the Ukrainian authorities. Today, here within the walls of the British Parliament, I ask you, our dear British colleagues, to initiate a debate and take decisions to recognise Russia as a terrorist state. Because terror is its true nature. Because Russia will not change unless we force it to. The increased pressure just announced by the Americans may help force Russia to make peace. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth has presented the Kremlin with an ultimatum. What does this mean? According to analysts, it's a preview of America's very clear stance in the event of a failure of diplomatic efforts to end the war. The Secretary of State may be indirectly referring to support for Ukraine, not only through the imposition of further sanctions on Russia, but also through the supply of weapons such as Tomahawk long-range missiles. Both soldiers on the front lines and analysts agree that Tomahawks in the hands of Ukrainians, even with limited capabilities to strike targets deep inside Russia, would be a real game changer. If they find the right use for the Tomahawks, I think a lot will change. If they are used against the right targets, I think it will affect the situation. During the continuing war, both sides have adapted to the conditions on the front lines and in the rear. Ukraine's growing potential, along with successive deliveries of modern weapons, has forced the Russians to respond by stretching their supply lines beyond the range of, for example, the HIMARS missiles. Tomahawks, however, are in a completely different league. Depending on the variant, the Tomahawk has a range of up to 2,500 kilometers. This means that if the missiles were to find their way into Ukraine's arsenal, Russia would have to relocate its bases and military airfields beyond the Urals. This is because the Engels II air base in the Saratov region, from which Russia sends strategic bombers to attack targets in Ukraine, would be within Kiev's strike range. Kiev would also be able to reach the Shahed drone factory in Yelabuga, and even the Northern Fleet base in Murmansk. Possible approval for Ukraine to acquire Tomahawks is to be the subject of talks between Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky. The meeting is scheduled to take place tomorrow at the White House. Donald Trump told the media that Ukraine is planning to go on the offensive, and that the time has come for Washington to make important decisions in this regard.